Take us to who you were, Marylen, as a young woman. You were a philosophy major, and you have a master's degree in education, and she was the only woman at that time accepted into law school.
No, wait a minute. No, I've got to straighten this story out. First of all, I am not famous. I am not extraordinary. My husband, Frank Jacobs, is here. My friend, Freda Kottman. Janice Brannon, who really has done so much for Oasis. They know I'm not at all. I mean, this is all fake. Sister Mary Jo Anderson knows. But, okay, I'll go along with this. Yes, I was a philosophy major at Washington University in St. Louis. And I got out of school, and there were no ads in the papers for philosophers at all. I couldn't type, I couldn't take shorthand. I was 20 years old. And I thought that I didn't have a disciplined mind. And the people who work with me know I don't have a disciplined mind. So I thought I would apply to law school. And there was only one woman in the law school at that time. And amazingly enough, I got accepted. And my parents, who were so supportive of anything that was educational, I went home and I was so excited, got into law school, and my father said, absolutely not. You're going to spend 3 years of hard labor. I'm going to spend a lot of money. I think the tuition was $375 a semester. And you're going to be some glorified law clerk. And if you want to continue on, that's fine, but it's either social work or education. And, but of the two, my philosophy professors talked me into going into education and took me by the hand and told the people in the Department of Education not to let me do play and games, but to put me into something challenging. Sorry.
That's great. You straighten out the story every time. That's great. Tell us a story.
Oh, wait a minute, I've got to stop now. I've got to stop because Frank knows this story. So, fast forward many years. We have friends, very successful lawyer in St. Louis, and he was in my high school class, U City. Okay, he was at the bottom of the class. He got into the University of Missouri on probation. He barely got out of school, and he got into Washington U Law School. And Frank said to him at dinner, well, how did you get in? And he said, well, in 1957, if you could write the check, they had 160 places and only 60 applicants. That just destroyed me. I've never been the same since.
So there you were, you had education became your passion. You got your degree, Master's of Education.
Yes.
You became very involved in creative. The creative word came up a lot. Creative thinking about education. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, my specialty was curriculum development, and I taught in a public school for a year, but then Washington University invited me to come back and teach in the Department of Education, and they had me supervising student teachers. That wasn't challenging enough, so then I went to the University of Missouri and in St. Louis and taught curriculum development, which is really my specialty, and that's really what Oasis was curriculum development ideas. And
so at some point, you had an Easter Bunny experience. Tell us about that. What happened there?
Yeah, well, in addition to teaching, I was working at a laboratory that was set up by the Education Act, part of Johnson's Great Society. And there were 10 labs and centers set up across the country, and one was in St. Louis. And it was a very innovative place where they developed programs for a 10-state region. We were going to change society by the way we educated teachers and kids. So by happenstance, I went there, and I was working on some proposals. And they were all about connecting cultural institutions with the schools. And that was the day of hands-on exploratory education, which I really believe in. And as in many cultural institutions at that time, kids really didn't participate. They were behind a glass case or behind a rope. And so we developed some programs that really brought activity and exploration to the connection. At any rate, after doing the conference in St. Louis that got some publicity, the Jesuit priest who was head of the area agency on aging called me and said, I want you to take a day out of your life with him. As I always said, he wore collars, I thought I had to say yes. So he took me around to the senior centers that were not only in St. Louis, but across the country. And what I saw was the free hot lunch program, place where people got Social Security advice, and they had ombudsman program for people looking at nursing homes. And I saw people who were playing bingo, watching television, and the last place I was at, and I can never forget it, it was before Easter, and people were gluing bunnies on placemats. And after we left, he said, what do you think? And I said, I don't think this is a good way to grow old. And it really hurt my heart. I thought that obviously these were people who had financial needs or they wouldn't have been at the centers. But this was a very condescending way to treat seniors, to have them sit around all afternoon and do the kinds of things, low-level crafts, that you did in kindergarten and first grade. And so he encouraged me to take this on. And I had never thought about this before, but it was, it seemed to me education was the thing to bring in. Education opens up the world, is stimulating, and maybe these people would enjoy arts and humanities and lectures and discussions. So I started to, with his encouragement, I started doing some research, and I was amazed at what the demographics were saying. And I was also amazed at the fact there wasn't much going on for people. So here we had this aging population that was really growing. But the kinds of things that we were doing for them were basic, but they didn't speak to quality of life. And frankly, this seemed to me like a new frontier. And it excited me. I was stimulated.
All of us have some good ideas, interesting ideas, things that should be looked at, but most of us go to bed. We think about it and go to bed. And you didn't give up for 3 decades.
Well, Janice Brown. Janet, can you raise your hand? You stand up. Janice has been with Oasis for how many years?
25.
25 years. Janice does everything. We have the most amazing staff. Janice does publicity, and she does PR, and she does technology, she does everything. And Janice knows that I will have another idea every day, right?
We call that the adventure.
I always say adventure. And there are a lot of ideas that nobody wants to do. But some of them just take possession of me, and I don't let go, right?
That's right.
And fortunately, I've been so fortunate in my life to have people with me who would work with me and bring them to fruition. It's sort of like this, you know, the idea for Oasis is a good one, but look, you all made this happen. This was not my labor to make this dream come true here.
So from what I understand, you had this great idea, you saw this great need,
Yes.
you saw the population, you saw this is big,
Yeah.
and nobody's doing anything about it. And you didn't really have tons of money to work with.
No.
So tell us how the partnership with the May company started. How did you get it
I'm going to
going?
go back a little bit, and I'm afraid I'm going to bore everybody to death, so you really have to make sure. Okay, so I got this grant from the Area Agency on Aging. I talked them into the fact that really I could bring these programs in and people would be stimulated. And there were senior centers in a 4-county area. St. Louis and, you know, a couple of 100 miles away. It was big, 48 centers. And I was naive enough to say that I would bring programs to 48 centers in 4 county areas. And they gave me the great sum of $8,000 for 2 years. So I would beg people I've worked with. I've been really active. I was a school board member in a great community for 13 years. And I knew a lot of teachers, and I've been involved in cultural institutions. So I would beg people, friends of mine, to come and go into a program. And if they wouldn't do it, I'd go. Now, all the programs I gave were not that great, but I really got to know the population. And I think we did some very creative things. Should I tell them the story about Mr. Eads and the bridge?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So they weren't all successful. One time, I had developed this program on teaching history to 4th and 5th graders with the Missouri Historical Society. And it was using the building of the Eads Bridge, which is a very famous bridge in St. Louis, the first railroad bridge across the Mississippi River, which is an enormous feat, built by a man who had no education past 4th grade. But it was built right after the Civil War. It is still standing. It's magnificent. Okay. So in order to do this, we put together archives around the time of the building of each bridge, put in kids' hands, menus from restaurants, fashion magazines, kids writing in the schools, which were all in German at that time, and all kinds of things about Eads. So I had all these archives, this wonderful slideshow. And so one place, it was a very big center, and I said, I'm going to come out and do Mr. Eads and his bridge. And I got there, and 60 people were sitting around tables for 4, and I started to unpack my stuff. And they said, where is Mr. Eads? And I said, Mr. Eads is dead. I'm going to tell you all about him, the building of the bridge. And they said, you mean Mr. Eads is not going to teach us how to play bridge? And I said, and they all got up and walked out except for 5 people. So at least you think I've always been successful. Okay, so then I started to think about the fact that there are people who are not in the senior centers who could benefit from some stimulation and some interesting discussion. And I formed a committee, and one of my friends was Margie May, whose husband, they were divorced, but he had been Buster May, who was the head of the May Company nationally. And I formed this committee, and we put on a couple of programs at the Art Museum, at the History Society, and we started thinking about where else. And Margie was used to thinking of department stores. So the May Company stores in St. Louis, and those of you from St. Louis remember Famous Bar, they had auditoriums in 3 of the stores, and they'd use them for sale land or fashion, and not-for-profit organizations could use them when they weren't doing that. So I went to them, and they said fine, and I started putting programs on once a month in each of these stores. And it was word of mouth, and we'd bring people from the Art Museum, we'd bring people from the Symphony, and we'd bring people from the newspaper and historians. And after a while, we'd fill the auditorium. And this took place for a couple of years. And it stunned me because people wanted more. They didn't want to come just once a month. And when I told them about the programs at the senior centers, they said, that's where the free hot lunch is, so we're not going there. And this is the days before there were lifelong learning programs on college campuses. But they didn't want to go there anyway because it's hard to park, and all the kids, they didn't know where to go. So it just dawned on me that this really was a new frontier. And I did some focus groups and talked to people and came to the conclusion that what I imagined was true, that the things that are really important to people as they grow older is stimulation, being able to pick up old interests, start new ones. Most importantly, meet people who have similar interests, because as you get older, you lose friends, your community narrows. Also, obviously, what's important is health. because you don't have any quality of life if you don't have health. And then the third thing that seemed to me, that people who have led productive lives, and they raise their family, they stop working, they have things to offer. And I think all of us want to feel we have some worth and that we have something to give the community. And that to me said volunteer work, but meaningful volunteer work, not addressing and stamping envelopes, but things that make a difference to other people. And so at this time, it so happened that the Reagan administration came in with the concept of public-private partnerships. And I thought, I really think this could be, because it was 1980 and the stores were empty. And we were bringing all these people in. As a matter of fact, I told somebody that they had tea rooms at that time, do you remember? They all had tea rooms. And the tea rooms would empty. And so I went to talk to the president of May Company. I picked a very good day because, do you all remember the Jonesboro thing where the guy and people drinking? Well, business was so bad. I went to talk to Dick Battram, the president, the day he had a manager's meeting. He had a Jonesboro meeting in black crepe paper, and he had a big Kool-Aid bowl. And it was sort of like, guys, we got to get the business up. And I went in to tell him this idea I had, give us space and we'll do programs 5 days a week. And he sort of looked at me. Department stores were not eager to take on not-for-profit organizations in their space on a permanent basis. If they did something wrong, the store's got to answer for it. So I said, the stores are empty. And if you come to our programs, you'll see we bring a lot of people in. You'll get activity, whether they buy or not. And besides, they're valued customers. Their children are valued customers. So, do we have time to tell the story about Annalie Wonka? So something almost disastrous happened. So we had these programs once a month. And they said, well, we'll come see one of your programs are like and who comes. So they picked a date, and that was the date that I was having a woman who had written a book on Sacagawea. You all know who Sacagawea was, okay? It's very important because, this is St. Louis, Lewis and Clark. And the book was a very interesting book. And I invited her to come in. What I did, I couldn't pay these people, so I took them to lunch beforehand and talked about what they were going to say and told about the audience. And I said, well, you've obviously taken the Lewis and Clark Trail. She said, oh yes, 10 times. 10 times? She said, yes, as myself, and then once when I was Sacagawea. I said, really? She said, yes, I am Sacagawea reincarnated. And the reason I'm here today is because I think it's very important for older people to discover who they were in a previous life. This is terrible. They're going to think I am crazy people talking. So the only thing I could think of is I said, oh, that's a wonderful idea. I said, I promise, let's come back and we'll do a program just on that. But I have to ask you today, these people are coming expecting to hear about the book. So would you please just focus on the book? And then another time we'll do reincarnation. But the whole time I sat there just thinking, oh, please don't get on this. Fortunately, she didn't. And they were favorably impressed. But they didn't think I'd get the grant. But I did. And that started us. Now, in the beginning, I want to tell you that what they did was they just, they'd make room on the floor. So, for those of you who remember Clayton Famous, it was, you'd walk through the mattresses. In Southtown, you had to go through the appliance department, which is a little problematic because they had the TVs going on, but then you'd see people doing yoga and painting and listening to lecture. Northtown, you went through the lingerie department to get to us. But I had committed to open 4 cities in 2 years. The Exemplar in St. Louis and then copy it in 3 other cities, because the problem that existed in St. Louis existed everywhere. The aging population and the need for promotion of quality life was everywhere. I think I've told you too much about the beginning, but
All right, so it sounds like you were able to convince the department stores this was a good thing. You kept getting money when they kept thinking, I'll just make this promise and she won't get the money. And then suddenly you had the money and the popularity and the acknowledgement as a curriculum developer of what you were doing. Talk to us about that third part, working with children. How did the idea of, okay, we've got the seniors, this is going well, how did pairing seniors with children come about?
One day, a very prominent member of our community who ran this program for inner city children came to me and said, do you have volunteers? I know you have volunteers. Would you have some people would come down and work in the summer program working with our kids? And I didn't know if we could do that, but we made a call. Were you there at that time, Janice, when this started?
That was before me.
That was for you, okay. So it's more than 25 years ago. I think it's 28, okay. So we made a call for volunteers, and we got about 12 or 14 people said yes, they'd like to do it. So the next thing we did, a la curriculum development, is, well, what are you going to teach? And we have to develop the curriculum, and we have to make the handouts for the kids, and they have to be age appropriate. And you know, there was cooking, and there was poetry writing, and there was painting, and there was puppetry, something else. Anyway, we made this preparation. They were to go down once a week. 5 days a week for 4 weeks. And I honestly did not know if they would really do it, if they would go into the inner city, if they would connect with these kids. These were mainly county people. And we had some minority members, but not a great many. And it was a great success. They loved the kids, but in evaluating the program, they came back and said, we're crazy about working with the kids, but none of them can read. And it didn't make any difference what level we put these handouts together, they couldn't read. Well, okay, that is another thing we can do. And that started the Intergenerational Tutoring Program, which is now in how many cities, Janice? 19. And I think we've tutored almost 500,000 children, close to 500,000 children. We have people who have tutored for 20 and 25 years. They have to go through training, as you all know, just like the program here. It's been an incredible boon for the schools because we know that the best teacher in the world cannot devote the kind of time she has to every child in that classroom. Kids come with a lot of problems, and it's impossible. Some of these children really need one-on-one attention. And the tender, loving care of a mature adult who's going to show up every week just to be with them and talk about what they are interested in.
So the program was going, you had more ideas, and each one led into another. Tell us about the geographical expansion. So you were in St. Louis, surrounding counties, program development was happening. How did you get out to other cities, and how did you decide where to go next?
Well, after the first year was such a success, I had contacted, I liked the department store idea, so I contacted Federated and Sears, and they were interested in talking to me about the program, but they wanted the support of the program to be tied to the sales generated by the people. That's not what I was interested in. But May Company said to me they were interested, and they would call ahead to 3 other cities to see if the presidents were interested. And so I ended up in 3 other May Company cities, and everybody said, well, how'd you choose them? Well, again, the grant was for a pittance, and it was a 2-year program, 4 cities, $260,000. That really doesn't go very far. And so I went to the places where I had friends who would pick me up at the airport. I could stay at their house, and they could you do what you have to do. And after the 4 years, now, the May Company made an arrangement with us. The sponsors of the federal sponsors of the Administration on Aging. And I talked them into doing it because I said, you've got these senior centers. Numbers are very important to you. But you've got a whole swath of middle-class people who are not going to go to those nutrition sites. But they will come to our program. You sponsor us, you get their numbers. So they like that. And then because the health component I thought was very important, we went to hospitals. Fortunately, the first day I came to San Diego, I walked into Sister Mary Jo Anderson's office, and she said yes immediately. It would be no program here if she hadn't sponsored us with her hospital. So after the 2 years, May Company was really sold, and they made a deal with us that they would sponsor us in any city where their store was willing to take us on and had room for us. And it had to be run nationally from the St. Louis office, because if somebody had a problem, if Simona made somebody mad in the store, they wanted me to be responsible, not the store. And so it had to be managed from St. Louis, from my office, and they would give us 20% of our annual budget, but I had to raise the 80. And so that was an interesting challenge. So we used City's Office on Aging, County Office on Aging, hospitals, foundations.
So we had a chance to chat last night, and you meet Marylen and you think, okay, well, it was maybe a little tough. She had to raise money, she was flying around, sleeping on friends' couches. You agreed to help me ask the question. You had no personal things going on in life? You just dedicated the whole life to Oasis and just kept growing and growing. Talk to us what was happening in your own life and how you had the stamina and the tenacity to keep going. You had some difficult times. This was really taken off.
Well, yeah. While I was developing the program and working, my mother had an aneurysm in the brain, and she was brain damaged and paralyzed for 16 years. And my father would not put her in a nursing home. She was at home with him, with nurses, but my sister and I really did not help out. And then my husband had colon cancer, and after 7 years, he died. And I had 2 very young teenagers, and frankly, very little money. But I think sort of my philosophy is that the thing that I always said at home to the boys is pull up your socks. And I think that none of us go through life without some tragedy and some hard times. I mean, everybody has it. And you have 2 choices. You can give into it and you can wallow. Or my way is to keep busy and do something that I feel is positive and get out of myself. And this was a very good opportunity for me to sort of hopefully improve lives for some other people and frankly set an example for my kids. And I think all of us as we age have a responsibility to set an example for the younger generation of how you age gracefully and how you age productively without self-pity, moaning and groaning about the fact that you can no longer do what you could before, but focus on what you can do and enable other people to discover new life. And I think one of the things that we do best is create community. And there's great health in community. Depression and social isolation are a tremendous problem in our nation, and they lead to poor health. And I think by helping people stay well mentally and physically, we help ourselves, our family, and our community. I've talked too much, you don't want to hear anymore.
So I have a couple more questions and then we'll turn it over to the audience. You're in a room full of people who serve on many boards in the San Diego nonprofit community. You were at the helm of Oasis. You birthed it, you envisioned it, you fought for its survival and funding for 19 years. Many founders have that founder syndrome and can't let it go. How did you manage to so gracefully find a new CEO when you knew the time was right?
Yeah, well, it was after 25 years, but I must say, two things happened. First of all, I met my husband, Frank Jacobs. We had been together 59 years before, but didn't get married, but we were back together again. And I think we wanted to have a little bit more time with each other. But I really think that a founder can kill a program if you stay on too long. And the other thing is that I'm an idea person, but I'm a rotten administrator. Isn't that right, Jane? And I know that as the program grew, we needed to find somebody who had skills that I did not have, and we did. We found Marcia Curtis, and for 15 years, she's been tremendous. She took us through this change. And I was there, I hoped, in the way that she wanted me to do. You know, I'd come up with ideas, and I'd badger her all the time, but I always said, now you're the boss. If you don't want to do this, okay, I'll leave you alone. I'd nag a little bit. But she was the boss, and she was great. And now we just hired, Marcia's retired, and we have this fabulous new, energetic, big, young, enthusiastic guy coming on. And he is going to be the face of Oasis, not me. And I just want to say, I think that again and again, I saw the sign outside and my eyes welled up. It just touches my heart to see what you all have made of this idea. I wasn't here to do it, you did it. And it's wonderful, and you're touching so many lives. And I've said more than you want to hear.
So last question.
Yeah.
Would you share how old you are and what's your philosophy, personal, on aging?
Yeah, okay. I was 80 on March the 13th, and I just don't think about it. And I can't do everything I did, and like everybody else, I have some physical problems. But I just don't think that it's an issue. I'm going to keep going as long as I can, and I think as long as you keep involved and active, and keep smiling. I can't stand my smile, but I always feel like my teeth are so big. But I think that Frank and I are very active, and we really try, and if somebody comes for help, we really feel an obligation to do whatever we can, and I think that keeps us young. And if you can give money, fine, but I think there's so many other ways that you can support other people, and I think this keeps you young. So I hope all of you will support this effort that can outreach to so many people who need it.